The waters of the Indonesian archipelago are haunted by a fearsome South Seas goddess. Her name? Loro Kidul. Now, Loro Kidul can take on three forms. One, a beautiful, seductive young woman. Two, a creepy, gnarled old hag. And three, an enormous, fierce serpent. In Indonesia, there's a superstition. You should never wear green when swimming on a south-facing beach. For if you do, she's likely to sneak up under you and snatch you and pull you under, and you'll never be seen again. Now, I don't take too much stock in superstitions, but this one, I just might believe, because I just may have had an encounter with none other than Loro Kidul herself. This was 30 years ago. I was living and working as a volunteer English teacher in Indonesia. I was taking a ferry from the island of Sumatra all the way to the island of Bali, a journey that should have taken about 27 hours. When I boarded the ferry, I signed my name on the ship manifest right next to number 93. And I remember that because when I got into the hull of the ship, there in capital letters written in English were the words, maximum capacity, 50 persons. I began to count, and I stopped at 200 passengers. At the time, I simply chuckled. I was in my early 20s, and this is part of what I found so thrilling, exhilarating even, about living in Indonesia, a total disregard for petty regulations such as maximum capacity limits. Well, just 6.5 hours into our journey, it happened. What do you expect to happen when you have 200 people on a boat that's only supposed to hold 50? The toilet jams. Now, the toilet wasn't much more than a hole in the deck of the ship leading through a pipe directly into the ocean. I had tried to use the toilet, and whoa, I couldn't even find the hole. It was buried under a mound of human sewage. She caught my attention as she paced to and fro in front of the bathroom. She was young and beautiful. She wore a shimmering white hijab with a matching gown. I knew she had to go to the bathroom, and finally, she slipped inside. Now, when two waves meet, they don't cancel each other out. They add together. It's physics. There must have been a wave from the front of the ship and one from the back, and they must have met directly under that sewer pipe because the doors of the bathroom were nearly blown off its hinges, and a briny mist filled the hull. The passengers began to cough and gag, and then, coming out of the mist, no longer white, was the woman. I remember how she stood there a moment, completely still, her arms outstretched, her mouth agape. A strand of human sewage hung from her upper lip and slowly connected to the lower. Some of us rushed up to help her, but whoa! She was covered in human bowel movements. Then, probably in shock and just seeking help, she began to come at us, wailing, "Ah!" And when she neared us, we all surged around her to the other side of the hull, whereupon slowly, like a reanimated corpse, she pivoted and made her new approach. "Ah!" And when she neared us, we surged around her again to the other side. What we didn't realize was what was happening up at the helm of the ship. With 200 people moving from side to side to side, we had completely overpowered the steering system, causing the boat to spiral dangerously off course. No one had ever experienced this before. But we all knew what was happening when it happened. The entire boat began to shiver and tremble. There was a sickening grating sound, and then we lurched to a complete standstill. We had run aground. Sure enough, when we opened the doors to the hull of the ship, framed in the doorway was a tiny island, one of the many that make up Pulau Seribu, the 1,000 islands, most of which don't even have names, just numbers, most of which are completely uninhabited. We went into an evacuation protocol, making a chain of people from the boat to the beach. And because it was so treacherous, when we got to the beach, we lined up for a head count. We all held our breath as the captain counted the passengers. It turned out the manifest had 273 names on it. If the captain came up with 272, one person hadn't made it through the raging surf. If two people, 271, we had lost two. Well, nobody was ready for the number he kept coming up with. 274 people. That meant one of two things. Either someone had not signed their name and paid for their fare, or two, somehow between the boat and the beach, someone had joined our party. The captain assumed the former, demanding to know, all right, who hadn't paid for their ticket? Well, the person in question made herself known almost immediately. Everyone backed away, and right there in our midst was an incredibly old woman, stooped so low it was like she was on all fours, with dark wrinkles on a face that was nearly simian, deep set eyes. Her strands of hair hung down and blended with what were once maybe shreds of clothing. "Were you on our boat?" the captain demanded. She heard him, and she didn't hear him. "Do you live here?" he asked. There were no structures. There was no source of water. She held up a crooked finger and pointed right at him. She laughed. "Kau semua akan mati. You're all gonna die." And with that, she bounded surprisingly quickly across the sand to the woods at the edge of the beach. We were all unsettled by the woman's appearance. The captain went about the business of examining the hull of the ship. The tide came in, the boat lifted up, and he determined it was unsafe for the passengers to reboard. He left a crew member with us. He radioed our position for a rescue, and then we all watched as the ferry disappeared over the horizon. The sun began to set, and with it, so disappeared our hopes. A wind came up. We built a fire and all huddled in close. No one wanted to admit it, but it soon became undeniable. Woven in with the wind was a human voice. "Tolong saya, tolong, help me." a group of elderly women grabbed the shipmate and told him, "It's that woman in the woods. Go see what she wants." They thrust a burning branch into his arms and pushed him in the direction of the woods where the voice was coming. We all watched as the flame from that branch disappeared to reappear intermittently as he moved through the trees. And then there were 2 flames, and then 3, and then 1 big flame. And then the shipmate came running out, shouting, "Hoppy, fire!" He had lit the woods on fire. And because it was the dry season, the whole hillside went up. Flames began to shoot up 4, 5 stories in the air. Blasts of hot, greasy smoke drove most of us right back into the ocean. I don't know how long I was standing in the waves when something bumped me from behind. And when I turned around, there was a man holding a lantern. "Get in, we've come to rescue you." It was an entire fishing village that had been mobilized. The captain had radioed the wrong position, so it was actually a good thing that we had lit the island on fire, because the fishing village was able to redirect itself and come and rescue us. We were taken to a small town on the north coast of Java, where, as it turned out, a newspaper article was written about us. The headline, "Ferry Trip Cursed from Beginning." The captain was interviewed. He was being fined and in danger of losing his ferry license. Indignant, he shouted, many times he had made this journey with many more passengers. The problem with this trip was that this group of passengers was particularly full of crap. What interested me was an interview with the shipmate, because I hadn't heard what he had seen in the woods. He had followed the voice to a tree where he held up the burning branch, and at the last instant, through a gap in the foliage, he had seen the open mouth of an enormous serpent, which had struck, sending burning embers throughout the woods, which had lit the island on fire. The old woman was not among those rescued by the fishing village. Yes, the headline of the article read, "Ferry Trip Cursed from Beginning." But most people reading that article did not consider us unlucky. While her name wasn't mentioned once in the article, Loro Kidul was in the backs of everyone's mind who read it. And very few encounter Loro Kidul and live to tell the tale. Thank you.